For this assignment, we had to pick out a film that has either been remade or rebooted, and then go into loads of detail into the facts and figures and reasons why. Reboots and remakes are a huge part of the film industry, as it's a way of taking an idea already used and changing it to make it bigger and better, still making money. There are many examples, such as Planet of the Apes, which has been rebooted 3 times. Make of it was poor, but the second was critically a lot better, but the third reboot is the best of the lot, and has been getting a lot of praise for its use of special effects and acting performances. In terms of choosing a film, I decided to pick a film series I'm extremely passionate about, and that is Spider-Man. Spider-Man is arguably the most famous character in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. He was first created in 1962 by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, and since then he has mainstay in the comics and had numerous TV shows. However, that all changed in the late 90s when an idea that was put forward to finally bring Spider-Man to the big screen. This was only the second ever to hit the cinema after X-Men, which was released in 2000. Spider-Man was finally released May the 4th, 2002 to wide critical acclaim, with lots of praise given to its plot, special effects and acting performances of Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man and William Dafoe as Norman Osborn. The film was nominated for Oscars at the 75th Academy Awards. This film is considered to be the movie that changed the game because of its box office performance. It had a budget of $140 million, but grossed an incredible $820 million, which made many people take note, and since the establishment of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is all because of the success of Spider-Man. From the success of Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3 were released in 2004 and 2007 respectively. Once Spider-Man 3 was released in 2007 to mixed reviews, plans were put in place to release Spider-Man 4 in 2011 and Spider-Man 5. They were going to be filmed back to back. Then there were plans to release a Sinister Six movie. However, in 2009, problems with the script caused it to be scrapped. Spider-Man was off-screen for 5 years when The Amazing Spider-Man was released in 2012 with a whole new cast and a different take on the story. Andrew Garfield was in the lead role and Emma Stone was Gwen Stacy. The film garnered a lot of hype because Spider-Man was played by talented actor Andrew Garfield. Even though the reviews for the Spider-Man reboot weren't as successful as the original Spider-Man, it was praised for its use of special effects and its ability to make it look like a natural movement when Peter is swinging. Also, the performances of Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone were deeply praised as well as their chemistry on screen. However, even though a Spider-Man film hadn't been seen in the cinemas in 5 years, it didn't perform nowhere near as well as people thought it would. At the worldwide box office, it grossed $725 million, which is just under $100 million below the original Spider-Man film. Comes to what country they were made in and also the eras. To start with, Spider-Man is an American franchise, as the whole universe was an American creation, so both films were filmed in America. However, they were made in a very different era. For example, the original Spider-Man was made in 2001 and released in 2002, and The Amazing Spider-Man was released in 2012. What's interesting is the film is arguably bigger now than it was in 2002, as the MCU is well established now with over. When trailers hit the internet, they are massive events and are watched millions of times in the space of 24 hours. There are so many more cinemas in the world now, and many ways to watch films online. I would consider film one of, if not the biggest part of human culture. To get to my point, you would have expected The Amazing Spider-Man to perhaps outperform the original Spider-Man, considering with the established Marvel Universe and the hype surrounding comic book movies, so for it to underperform by about 100 million is a surprise. The theory I have to why this is maybe because people are also not happy with the fact it was rebooted. The budgets for both films were huge, but The Amazing Spider-Man's budget was massively different to the original. Spider-Man 1 had a budget of $140 million, whereas The Amazing Spider had a budget of $230 million, which is significantly more than the previous film. This would have had an impact on production because the new film had a lot more money for special effects, stuntmen, and more high-profile actors, whereas the original had to be a lot more careful and not waste the money they were given. The reason why I think the more money was given to the reboot is because the MCU was established and the first 3 films if the Spider-Man universe made a lot of money, so they probably felt that making the budget bigger, they would make it better and hopefully make more money or the same amount. Whereas with the original, there was only one previous film, X-Men, which didn't perform brilliant, so they were probably sceptical about throwing an obscene amount of money at it. However, it performed amazingly, which meant a much larger budget was used in the second and third films. I would say the audience of these films are aimed at are the same. I think they would be aimed at the comic book movie lovers from the ages of 10 onwards, as most films are 12 plus. People who are into action, adventure, as well as far-fetched fiction. I think when producers are looking at making a comic book movie, the same conventions apply. Action, big fight scenes, large set pieces, elements of comedy, car chases, credible stunts, and finding an interesting plot. If a comic book movie has this, then it would do well because the film industry is very comic book dominated these days. There have been many examples of reboots and remakes in the comic book universe. The best example would be Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy. Batman 1 and 2 were released in the late 1980s and the early 90s. They were critically a success and they got a lot of good reviews and made a lot more money at the box office. However, the next two Batman movies were critically panned and made Batman into a laughingstock. However, Christopher Nolan in 2005 brought out Batman Begins and he changed the way everyone saw Batman. When it comes to special effects, film has changed a hell of a lot. For example, when you look at the comic book universe and how it's evolved, it's quite incredible. For example, Superman 1 was the very first superhero movie, and then you have had the most recent comic book movie, Captain America Civil War, and the difference is astounding. When making Spider-Man, same right way to make sure all the fight scenes were not 100% computer generated, that there was some element of realism. However, some scenes would have been impossible to shoot without using computer generated imagery. This is include the swinging scenes, which were very hard to shoot because it was such an unnatural movement. The Amazing Spider-Man was released in 2012. Technology has evolved since then. It was the first film to use free LED digital TS5 wireless and handheld beam splitter mirror, which meant it was easy to avoid 2D and 3D conversion. Also, 3D was a thing now, and Spider-Man didn't have that luxury back in 2002. So Amazing Spider-Man was released in 3D, which meant a different cinema experience altogether. It was also released in IMAX, again, something the original Spider-Man couldn't do as that technology didn't exist. Also, the Lizard was created using motion capture, whereas the Green Goblin was William Dafoe in a suit with the occasional stunt double and special effects. Also, with the added technology, the web scene could look a lot more natural, which was a criticism of the original. When it comes to marketing, a film it's so important that it's marketed in the right way, as you want to get the attention of the audience you're promoting the film to, as this can have an impact on the box office. Over the course of 10 to 15 years, the way films have been marketed have changed. Back in 2002, you would have had trailers, advertising, billboards and posters on buses and trailers shown in the cinema. However, now it's a whole lot different. As well as on top of all that, there is an introduction of social media, as trailers appear on Facebook when you like a certain page, which is the same with Instagram and Twitter, and you get the same trailer from 1,000 posts. An example of this would be the Guardians of the Galaxy 2 trailer, which was released online, and in 24 hours it was viewed 84 million times, which is an incredible number. Also, you see set photos on social media, which is also gets you hyped, especially when it includes spoilers. Also, YouTube is another way to watch trailers, and back in 2001 YouTube didn't exist. The way the original Spider-Man trailer was shown was in a teaser in the cinema before films such as American Pie 2, Planet of the Apes and Jurassic Park. This would have been a good way to get people's attention who perhaps might not be your typical comic book lovers. Also, with marketing, it depends on the audience you're aiming your film at, because a film could be marketed in a different way depending on the sort of film it is. Like, you're not going to see loads of billboards of the films such as Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream and Saw on buses, because it's going to probably scare young children, whereas a film like Spider-Man is going to appear everywhere because he's marketable. Spider-Man is a huge part of the comic book universe, and after Spider-Man 3 was the final of the original Spider-Man films, they could have ended it there, but as he's been around for such a long time and he's been in numerous comic book movies and he's in so many different Avengers stories, it would have been a crime to not keep him relevant for years to come, because he's such a marketable character. Which is why I believe The Amazing Spider-Man was rebooted, because there's so many different stories to tell about Spider-Man. So there would have been other ways to make money and other ways to tell people who don't read the comics his story. The idea of studios relating to their audience is interesting, because even though I think some films are created for fans, like the likes of Batman v Superman, you look at the elements of that film, a lot of it is comic book based, and if you don't read the comics you won't understand what's going on. However, I do believe that there is also an element of truth to the fact that they don't care, because Spider-Man 3 wasn't a critical success. However, it made a hell of a lot of money, and for them to suddenly axe that story and within 4 or 5 years to reboot it a completely different way may have annoyed a lot of people, considering they might have liked the original Spider-Man a lot more and they felt like he had a lot more to tell, but because they felt that they couldn't take him on any longer, they decided to reboot it. Just about Spider-Man, there have been many examples of remakes and reboots that haven't been received as well as people thought they would have been. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is probably the best example, which was released in 1971 and it was a massive hit, and it was a huge success and made a lot of money. However, 35 years later, it was rebooted with Johnny Depp in the lead role. Many people believed that it should have been left alone and it didn't need a reboot because Gene Wilder played the role so well and they didn't think anyone could play the part. Finally, to finish off, I'm going to explain if I think it was a successful reboot. I love the original Spider-Man films, so was very disappointed when they rebooted it. From some research I've done on forums, many people were disappointed to see Spider-Man 4 scrapped as they felt the story could have continued. However, when the film was released, it received general positive reviews, with many people saying they liked the new take on the origin of Peter Parker and learning more about his parents and doesn't even get mentioned in the originals. They also praised Andrew Garfield's as Spider-Man and the use of special effects. In terms of the box office and reviews, it didn't beat the original, which would have been disappointing as it was an era dominated by comic book movies. However, it did produce a sequel. However, it was critically panned and was the last performing Spider-Man film at the box office, which meant plans for a third and fourth film were scrapped. Whereas Spider-Man 1 produced two successful sequels. So taking all this into account, the rebooted version has a lot of good elements such as special effects and certain acting performances, but overall, as it has been scrapped now, I would say this reboot wasn't as successful as people had hoped it would be.